What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 41st episode of the PlayStation Drive. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Turford. I'm joined, as always, by the man himself, Mr. Matt Sawinski. Matt, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Thursday morning this time, good sir?
I am doing swell, my friend. I am ready. I'm going to see the Batman tonight, and I'm excited. I want to see that very, very sad, scary Batman. And I am. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing well. You know, it's been an early day, but you know, it's been a day. I mean, I'm not going to be checking out the Batman right away. I will wait until it's not in theaters anymore before I go watch it. But I mean, a lot of people are liking it, so you never know. Might actually be a good movie. But enough about Batman, because it's the PlayStation Drive. We talk about PlayStation all the time, except for when we're talking about Batman. So folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Of course, number one, you can support us by subscribing to us on your podcast feed of choice. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. We're on all the places you find podcasts, so check us out there. Also, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts specifically, leave us a rating. You know, maybe leave us an Apple Podcast review. All that stuff helps the show grow, and it's an awesome way to support the show. None of that, but if you're watching us on YouTube, on youtube.com/YumiCapri, of course, you can, of course, like, comment, subscribe, share, binge, ding, 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 ring that bell for notifications. But also, again, all that stuff helps the show get discovered. And then last but not least, of course, if you want early access to this and all of our shows, head over to Patreon. Patreon.com/YumiCapri is how you do that. You get early access to this show, all of our other shows, plus, you know, some exclusive goodies going up over there. But we have two other pieces of housekeeping that are not our usual things that we do need to go over real quick. So number one, if you're everyone's going to be listening to it on Friday because there is no early access for this show in particular because of something we're going to talk about in a bit. But Gaming for Guru starts today. So folks at home, if you don't know what Gaming for Guru is all about, of course it is. We're going to be helping raise money for the Autism Society of America in honor of our friend, the late, great Bobby Pauls, who passed away last year due to COVID-19. So we're going to be raising money for this charity, which was picked out by Bobby's family. So we're going to be streaming basically like 3 straight days. And by we, I mean a whole bunch of people in the Yumi Capri community, like Console Kato, like Quest for Pixels, like Sean Capri. And so if you follow the community on their respective Twitter pages, especially if you follow Sean, because Sean will basically be retweeting everyone's streams as they come about throughout the weekend. You can also donate if you're interested. The donation link is in the show notes for this recording. As well, there's a ton of prizes, including a Nintendo Switch, as well as a whole bunch of game codes, both from our friends over at Xbox Canada, as well as Ubisoft, Deep Silver, and a whole bunch of other partners have, you know, helped, you know, come together to celebrate the life of Bobby Pauls, the Nintendo guru. So definitely check out some of these streams over the weekend, even if you don't have bucks to toss in. And if you have bucks to toss, again, there's a lot of great prizes and incentives for doing so. Plus, you know, the money's going to a good cause. So definitely check that out as well all weekend long. I know Sean's doing his stream on Sunday from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. He's doing a 12-hour stream. But again, lots of great community members are going to be streaming for this. So check that out as well. But then last thing we have to talk about, Matt, and this is something that we have to I kind of want to get kind of ahead of because this is still, you know, a good chunk of time away. Like we're not, you know, this isn't kind of going to be an instantaneous thing, but we're about a month away at this point. So I feel like we need to talk about this at least a little bit. I'm actually going to be leaving the PlayStation Drive. Basically, this was a decision that wasn't made lightly, but basically, every year here at Yumi Capri, we like to kind of reevaluate a lot of our podcasts, try to see, you know, how the podcasts are going and, you know, what makes them unique and what people like about them and what they don't like about them and make a lot of changes as necessary. And one of the things we really noticed with this show and something that I've noticed just from, you know, being part of this show is that because I do this show and the Xbox Drive, there's a ton of crossover between the two shows to the point where like there's like 3 news stories we're going to talk about today, Matt, that are literally copy pasted from the Xbox Drive, you know, sheet essentially. And because I'm on both shows, it in a way makes a lot of crossover that makes it tough for this show to evolve in a lot of ways. So effective the week of April 7th, that's going to be my last episode of the PlayStation Drive with Matt. And then starting the week after on April 15th, you will be getting a brand new PlayStation Drive lineup with Matt and other people, which we'll be announcing those, you know, probably on the 15th, maybe ahead of time. We haven't really talked about when we're going to announce that stuff. But just know this will be kind of the last month you have me on the PlayStation Drive. I'm still going to be doing the RPG Cave and the Xbox Drive. So if you want to still hear about my opinions on some stuff, you can go check out those shows. But I really think that, and Matt, I'll let you go in just a second, but I think that this is really going to, help create a brand new vision for the show. And I think it's going to be awesome. I think it's going to be a great evolution of, what we've got now, and maybe we might go in a different direction with some stuff, but I'm really excited to see what Matt does with it. So Matt, take it away with what you have to say about this, of course.
Well, first off, I want to say how sad I am that you're leaving, even though I completely understand and respect the decision. Doing this with you, every week for almost the last year has been one of my favorite parts of my week every week. And I'm so happy that because of you, I got to join this absolutely wonderful community. I got to meet so many incredible people, and, our friendship that we've grown together just means so much to me. So this was a really difficult thing for us to kind of come to terms on. But I respect it and I appreciate it. And I'm very happy that you trust me with your baby that was the PlayStation Drive. But yeah, we're going to be, I'm actively looking for people, and we have some things in the fire that we're working on, but I'm excited to tell you all more about it in the future. I hope you stick around for the PlayStation Drive 2.0. I don't know, whatever we're gonna be, we're gonna be calling it as. But yeah, I'm excited. I appreciate you, Ryan, so very much. And as bittersweet as it is, I know that this next month is going to be one hell of a ride together. And again, you're going to be welcome on the show anytime, and I'm sure that won't be your last appearance on the PlayStation Drive, because we're gonna have much more fun to be had.
I was gonna say this obviously won't even be the last time Matt and I podcast together, because clearly there's going to be a bunch of reviews coming out and other discussions and crossover stuff that, is just going to make sense for us to cross over with. So I think you're definitely see more of that in the future. And even though I am definitely sad that we're not going to have our, normal Thursday tea time, Matt, because just like you, I've also really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and even getting to meet you in person was really special as well back in October. So I'm so very glad, first of all, for all the fans of the PlayStation Drive who have come out and let us know both on the Discord and on Twitter and everything else that they really enjoyed the show. And honestly, again, you've earned the trust of the show, Matt. I think you've done a phenomenal job since joining the team, and I think the show is just going to be so much better post the change. So I'm very excited to see where it goes from there. But again, we'll talk about that more as the weeks go on. But, we didn't want to drop this on everyone's laps, a week before and say, all right, guys, I'm gone. Bye now. We want to give some time to, of course, let this breathe a little bit before we, go from there. So there you go.
100%.
All right. Without any further ado, let's grab our 8 tracks, pop them in. It is time for the playlist. And Matt, even though it's been a bit of a interesting news week this week, we got to talk about the games that we played, because we played some cool games. So start us off, Matt. What'd you play?
Yeah, so first off, I just got Gran Turismo 7 this morning, so I have not had a chance to play it just yet, but, we'll have updated thoughts on that coming soon. So I just want to throw that out there. Thank you to PlayStation Canada for providing us a code for that. I'm stoked to get into it and take it for a spin, as they say. But as for the game I have been playing, Ryan, I am a weak man. I got sucked into the hype. I caved, even though you gave me very great advice to wait. I bought Elden Ring. I forgot to put this on the doc, but that's because I actually beat Sifu over the weekend.
Nice.
I finally took down the last boss, and that was kind of like one of the checkpoints for me, where I said, if I beat this very hard game, let me make myself more miserable while playing the next very hard game. Yeah. So I beat Sifu, loved that experience. The last boss, I literally took him down with my last sliver of health on the last age, gap that I had before it was game over, and I did it, and I'm very, very proud of myself. And then I went straight into Elden Ring. I started as a samurai, played for about an hour and a half, regretted my choice, and restarted the game as an astrologer. Okay. I think it is the primary magic class, because I'm a giant baby and I like to throw magic from far away and not get that close. And honestly, I think this is the most I've connected with a FromSoft game out the gate yet. I'm not a massive fan of what these games do, while I respect it, but there's something about Elden Ring's design and its open world that lets me kind of tackle things in a way that okay, if I'm stuck on this boss, I can go do other things and not just completely keep beating my head against the wall in frustration and just kind of grinding out the same area over and over again. This game, the way that it lets you explore and kind of, very organically find parts of the world that you're kind of hey, what is that? What is that over there? And then trying to figure out what to do next. I'm loving it a lot. I have taken down a couple of mini bosses. I haven't gotten through the first main boss yet. I almost had him. But I think I'm just a little bit underleveled. So I left to go again, just explore the world. And I ended up finding like a really cool new spell and, finding different stuff along the way. So just the way that this game kind of lets you live in the world. And even though there are incredibly difficult enemies abound everywhere, I feel like just the way that you can actually utilize stealth in a way that like feels important and actually feels like you can get through certain areas by stealthing your way around, along with the fact that just it's really cool. I have had a bunch of like ridiculous pop-in on PS5. I've heard that and like some texture slowdowns and stuff too. So technically it isn't perfect, but like it hasn't, none of it's like hampered my experience with the game so far. And I'm excited to see what's around the next corner. I'm actually genuinely curious to keep exploring the world. I don't think I've been sucked into an open world like this in quite some time. As much as I loved Horizon's open world, there's something about the way that Elden Ring sets it up that just feels a little bit more meaningful to explore, if that's a good way to say it. Especially because you're kind of like, again, there are no quest markers. There isn't like, here, go over here to do this thing. It's kind of like explore and figure it out. So I'm really enjoying it, Ryan. But how has your continuing journey with Elden Ring been?
I mean, for me, I talked about it on the show last week. I talked about how I, like going around stealth killing enemies. And I was having a really good time with the game. And I don't know if you do this, Matt, but I played 30 hours of Elden Ring in 4 days. So I was really into this game until about the 20 hour mark. And then my interest started to wane very, very quickly. Okay. But I was like, okay, I'm going to give it maybe like 10 or so more hours and go from there. And ultimately at this point, I've actually uninstalled the game because I'm taking a break and I don't know if I'll ever come back to Elden Ring. But the thing is that the reason why I kind of fell off a bit was not so much the game's fault. It's more just because it is such a like open world to the point where there's no quest markers. There's no like even low quest log. You have some story, but this game's more about the environmental storytelling or little story hints. I didn't feel, for me personally, there was enough carrot on the end of the stick to want me to get to that like 80 to 90 hour mark that a lot of people talk about in order to finish the game. Because even if I mainlined it at the point that I'm at right now, I'm still looking at like 30 hours more with the game. And I just wasn't really feeling that much because for me personally, I'm just not super into, because I don't mind open world games, but they're not like, I actually prefer linear games versus open world games. That's just the way I've always kind of been. And especially like, and I kind of liken this to travel, because when I go on vacation, if I ever go on vacation, because I'm not someone that likes to go on vacation that often, I'm not the type of person that likes to, go around a city and just explore stuff just randomly. That's just, never really been my thing. Like, I don't mind I like going to certain places that I'm excited to go visit, with the purpose of visiting them. But for example, like the last time I was in Japan, it was just like, just walking around and Kyoto and stuff like that was interesting for a while. But it is one of those things where like, once I'd seen all the things that I wanted to see, I didn't really want to do, maybe 3 or 4 days more of that. Right. So in a game like this, I almost had the same feeling where there wasn't anything pushing me to do anything. Like there was nothing that was really pushing the narrative forward or anything like that. So I almost felt like I was just, wandering aimlessly around the world, looking for bosses and for things to do. And that kind of gameplay style, again, just has diminishing returns for me, like specifically. So at the same time, I can definitely, understand why the game is getting the praise it's getting and understand why it's awesome. I can see the quality there. I definitely think it's the best From Software game, like by a mile at this point, like way better than Sekiro, which was my previous favorite game from them. And I really enjoyed the time I played with it. I loved the boss design. I love the enemies you fight. I love the open-ended map design that you talked about, Matt, where essentially, again, if there's a large enemy, it's not impeding your progress forever. You can run away and do other stuff and then come back. And I think all that stuff is really good. But it just wasn't enough to hold my attention forever. But I will still, treasure my memories playing that game. Cause again, I was so into it that I was, and so enjoying it that it's still a recommend for me, even though I didn't stick with it beyond the 30 hours. Cause I still I feel pretty happy even, sinking 30 hours into a game, Matt, and calling it a day. Like, I think that's still a good investment, even for the paying full price for a game. So because I don't need every game to be, 80 to 90 hour experiences kind of thing. So,
well, that's what I mean. The fact that you put 30 hours in, it's not like you played it for 2 hours and you're like, no, I'm done. Like you put you could have finished multiple games in that time frame, but it grabbed you enough that in that short time frame that you played that much. So that's awesome. And again, like, I don't know if I'm ever going to finish it either. This isn't like I'm committing to the next 80 or 90 hours, but I'm curious enough to keep going with it right now. And who knows, maybe when we meet back on the show next week, I'll have a similar story to yours. But I do know that you took something else out for a spin, Ryan.
Wink. Yeah. So thanks to our friends at PlayStation Canada, I have also been playing Gran Turismo 7. I actually got the game on Tuesday, and I've played about 15 hours of Gran Turismo 7 since Tuesday, and this game is awesome. I'm actually really enjoying Gran Turismo 7. What I like about it is something I talked about when talking about Elden Ring just now. It is more of a linear racing game versus something like Forza Horizon, where essentially you basically have this like map, this hub with a bunch of different locations on it that you'll unlock throughout the single player campaign. Because yes, it's a racing game that's basically a single player campaign. You do unlock multiplayer eventually, but you don't have multiplayer at the start of the experience, which is interesting.
Okay.
But you unlock it eventually, or if you play the game in offline mode, you have access to that as well, because the game is an always online game. I saw a lot of hubbub about that this week, but they talked about it. It's like an anti-cheat measure essentially, because there used to be a lot of cheating in previous Gran Turismo games, and they didn't want the community to kind of cheat a bit, especially because of the way the single player ties into the multiplayer, because essentially you've got your suite of cars that you unlock in the single player, that you can tune in the single player, that you can then take online and race against people. And because of that, they didn't want people to, break that system essentially, which is why it is an online only game, despite the fact that it's like 90% single player essentially. But I'm really enjoying it. Like the cartooning is really fun and streamlined. In fact, I know you were worried about that last week, Matt, when we talked about that. But essentially when you go and kind of add parts to your car, it works very similar to previous Gran Turismo games, but I think it's actually even a little more accessible than that, where essentially each car part basically tells you, hey, this is what this car part actually does. And then on the right, you see like a stat breakdown of what it actually does to your car. And then once you install it, that's it. You can tinker with some stuff if you want to get like that extra like 1% more percentile out of the part. But for the most part, if you play it with just the stock options that you buy from the car shop, like it totally works out. But then there's a whole bunch of different races all across, North America, Europe, and Asia. And basically there's different cups associated with them, and you'll basically unlock them as you go throughout the experience by utilizing the feature that they talked about during the State of Play called the Gran Turismo Cafe, which is basically like this cafe in the middle of the woods that you drive through, and you earn what's referred to as a menu. And then each menu basically has a list of objectives on it. It's basically like a quest from an RPG, essentially. It's like, hey, go get, higher than third place in this cup, and then or unlock these 3 cars, for example. You'll get stuff like that. And then you'll earn rewards from that, such as, new cars, new in-game currency. You'll unlock new tracks as well, because again, not all of the tracks are unlocked from the beginning. Again, it's very old school in its game design. You're basically unlocking things as you go. And yeah, I thought that that gameplay loop was like really satisfying and cool. And it really like encourages you to not just stick with one car the entire time. For example, there are certain cups that you have to win in order to fulfill the menu system that require a very specific type of car. So there are ones, for example, in the Japan Cups that require like a Japanese car that's like front wheel drive, essentially, in order to compete in it. And then other ones require like a 4-wheel drive car or a forward driving car. So you basically have to like make sure you have like almost like a suite of cars kind of lined up in order to basically take down all of the different races. And then not only that, but one of the most satisfying things in all of Gran Turismo is returned with the license system, where essentially you go do a bunch of licensed driving tests, essentially, and you earn different, driver's license, like the B license, the A license, the S license, and then so on and so forth up the chain. And those unlock new features as well. And those drills are really fun to go through. They not only teach you to be a better driver, but they're just fun little mini activities that for example, like making sure you stop on a specific stop with a really fast car, or teaching you how to utilize the racing line and a bunch of other cool stuff. So yeah, I'll have more to say, because we'll be doing like a discussion about this at some point, Matt, now that you have the game, but I'm really enjoying this game a lot, and I think it's pretty awesome. But I will open the press floor to Matt to ask a question.
Yeah, Matt Sawicki from the Press Pool. I have a quick question, Sir Ryan. I'm hearing a lot of people talk about the DualSense implementation and how cool it is. Can you please speak to that
Yes,
point?
I forgot to mention that, but the DualSense controller is amazing in this game. You can really feel the road, but also the way the triggers works. It actually like, I was thinking about this while I was playing. I was like, this feels like a real pedal, essentially because of the resistance it gives as you're holding down, the triggers to pedal. But you can especially feel it actually with the brakes in particular, because like it really encourages you to do kind of the half step on the brakes, essentially to kind of get more of a smoother brake experience. Or you can like slam on the brakes by pushing really hard down on the left trigger, essentially. And but if you're like driving on a dirt road, you can definitely feel like the controller kind of shaping up and down as you're driving on the dirt road. It almost feels like you're driving on a bunch of rocks, essentially. So yeah, I think the DualSense implementation is like really awesome in this game, and definitely like a really immersive feature that I wasn't expecting going into this. And then I'm
so excited to check.
I was gonna say the last thing I want to touch on, because I didn't mention it before. Visuals in this game are gorgeous; they look incredible, but I will always recommend play this game in performance mode. There is a ray tracing mode, but the ray tracing is only supported in the replays in playing in ray tracing mode. And then the frame rate's not amazing in that mode, whereas it runs at a buttery smooth 60 frames per second if you play in performance mode, and still looks gorgeous. Like, this is a very good looking game, especially because, again, it's not like an open world like something like Forza Horizon is. So they really only have to render these smaller tracks. But all the environmental effects and skyboxes that they have kind of outside the track look really beautiful. Plus the cars themselves look amazing. So I think this game visually looks really good on PlayStation 5 as well. So, well, more to say.
I'm excited to check it out. Yeah, because it's like you've just raised my hype even more, Ryan. Like, I haven't been in racing games for a while. Like, Forza Horizon was like my first return to racing in a while, and I haven't actually played Gran Turismo before. But the way that you talk about it makes me excited to check it out. So I'm excited to have a deeper discussion with you.
Yeah, for sure. Especially because, again, I think we're coming from two different angles. Because, again, you're new to the series, whereas I've played every Gran Turismo game going back to PlayStation 1. In fact, my brother Kyle, because I know he listens to the show, would probably be able to tell these awesome stories about me playing the game on PlayStation 1 and being so into it that I was like fine tuning my cars and doing all kinds of wacky stuff. Like, I took like a 1997 Nissan Skyline and tuned it up so high that it had like over 1,000 horsepower, but it couldn't turn left. So just trying to see how I can break the game by having this car that, goes 0 to 300 in like 2 seconds essentially. But again, it can't turn left. So it's like, how do you finish the race at that point? So just doing all kinds of crazy stuff like that. I have a lot of great memories with Gran Turismo. So again, I'm excited to talk about it there. And I think this game really does the series justice more than anything. So yeah, we'll talk about it later after we both had a chance to play it more. But enough about this. Let's slam the brakes on this conversation 23 minutes into the show, because it's time to talk about some breaking news. So first up, we got our March PlayStation Now games. We talked about it a little bit last week on the show about how we didn't have the count yet, but we do. So we got Shadow Warrior 3, which we talked about on the show last week. That's going to be only available until July 4th. But as we talked about in the show last week, it is a day and date PS Now release, which is awesome to see. But then we've also got Crysis Remastered, Relicta, I think that's how you say it, and then Chicken Police Paint It Red. Those are the 4 games on PlayStation Now. I mean, obviously, if you're interested in Shadow Warrior 3, but you don't want to, plunk down day one money on that game, like, it's a no-brainer probably to pick up PlayStation Now probably this month and dive into it that way. But otherwise, I think it's an okay lineup. I will say Crysis Remastered, I've talked about it in the show before. I don't think that's an amazing port of Crysis. It just doesn't run very well. And even after a bunch of patching, I still don't think it runs as well as I would have hoped. But Crysis is a really good game. So there's that there. And then the other 2 I've just never really heard of. So Matt, what do you think about this lineup?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you are. As I said before, I've never played any of the Shadow Warrior games. Well, it's exciting that this is coming day and date. It doesn't really do much for me personally. Never played Crysis either, and I've never even heard of Relicta or Chicken Police, though I did see some people excited about Chicken Police on Reddit when this was announced. So maybe it's worth a look into. But yeah, I think for me, it's an okay month. Doesn't really it's exciting that there's a new game day and date. The rest of it, I think, is whatever. It's not really for me personally, but each their own.
And that's kind of the feeling I get with most PS Now months. So, I mean, I think this is probably like an average month for PlayStation Now. But next up, the DICE Awards actually happened about a week and a half ago, but there was a set of interviews that came out after the DICE Awards and we got this story that came out about 6 days ago, talking to Housemarque, basically after Returnal won some awards at the DICE Awards. They basically did an interview with some of the developers over at Housemarque. And in an interview with Housemarque, they talked about how their next game is not actually going to be a sequel to Returnal. It's going to be a brand new IP. And they talked about it in the interview, how it's going to be closer to their arcade roots than even something like Returnal was. So we don't really know too much information about it or a time frame. It sounds like at the earliest, it's probably a 2023 game. But Matt, what do you think about this news that the next game for Housemarque is not a Returnal sequel, like a lot of people were really hoping for after that game's success?
I loved Returnal, but this doesn't really surprise me. Housemarque hasn't traditionally really been one for sequels, if I'm correct on that. Like they've usually gone towards new IP game to game. So this for me, while like Returnal was, by all accounts a big success and a lot of people really vibed with it, it did take a while for people to click with it on top of the things like, a checkpointing system that a lot of people are asking for. So this to me, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a sequel to Returnal in the future. But maybe that's 4 or 5 years down the line. While I know people were hoping for something like, an expansion or DLC or a sequel. Well, I do think it's disappointing that we weren't getting that imminently. I do like that Housemarque continues to do what Housemarque likes to do and continue to work on new IP after new IP. I just, it's exciting having a new world and a new adventure to go on. The arcade, the kind of return of the arcade style is for me, I have to see what the game is before I get excited about that, just because I'm not the biggest fan of their other more arcadey experiences, while I really loved Returnal. But yeah, I think it's cool, and I'm excited to see what it is, Ryan. But what about you?
Yeah, I think this is you hit the nail on the head. I think they definitely don't like to do sequels traditionally. In fact, the only series that they did more than one game for was Super Stardust, and that was it. Like, we didn't see an Outland sequel or a Resogun sequel or anything like that. Like, they've always tried to do new IPs. So I'm excited to see whatever this is. In the future. I really like Housemarque as a developer, and I'm kind of on the opposite side of the fence, where I think I liked their more arcadey style games more than as much as I did, or not Resogun, Returnal. As much as I did like Returnal, I think that I like more of their stuff, like Nex Machina, or Resogun a little bit more. But it doesn't sound like they're going in that type of direction either. Like, it doesn't sound like it's going to be a 2D game. It's probably going to be more of like, probably taking ideas from Returnal, but then going more of an arcadey direction with it. That sounds like the vibe I was getting from this interview, but I guess we'll find out next year. Because again, it sounds like this is still pretty far away, especially because I think Returnal DLC is coming out at some point too, if memory serves correctly. So that'll probably be this year, and then next year we'll see whatever's next from Housemarque. All right, next up, Tango Gameworks have released a prequel to Ghostwire Tokyo in the form of Ghostwire Tokyo Prelude, which is a free visual novel that sets up the story of the main game while also giving the player info on events that happen before Ghostwire's story picks up. This just kind of dropped on the store kind of out of nowhere about yesterday, and I've downloaded, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But I'm definitely going to be checking this out probably before next week's show, because I'm actually really excited for Ghostwire Tokyo. I love Tango Gameworks' games. I love horror games, and I like Japan. So, I mean, I'm really excited to find out more about kind of the lore here. Like, this visual novel has like an anime style to it as well. So I'm excited to check this out. But Matt, what do you think about this news?
Yeah, I love this. I think this is super cool. I'm also really excited for Ghostwire Tokyo, and to have like a bit of a visual novel, which I'm also a massive fan of. To kind of set up the story and to create some lore building even before you step into that world. With the main game, I think this is so cool. The fact that it's free is also just a really easy way to get people in. So if they do like the vibe of it, then it's a pretty easy transition to be able to pick up the game later on. I think this is really cool. I hope we see more of stuff like this. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, here's like a demo of the game in terms of like exactly the way that it is, but stuff like this, like a little spin-off, not really a spin-off, but like a prelude in a different style, I think is really cool, and I'm excited to dive into it. I downloaded it as well, but yeah, I just haven't had time to actually get in it yet, but I definitely will before next week's show, so we can talk about it, because this looks dope.
It pretty much came out like last night from the night we're recording this, like pretty late. So I mean, for the most part, we just didn't have time with this one. But again, super cool idea. And I wish we would see more of this type of thing. Because the last time I think we got something like this was like before Dead Space 2 came out, they did this like motion comic that was on Xbox Live Arcade that kind of set up the story for that game, like the in-between events between Dead Space 1 and 2. So I think that's the last time I remember someone doing something like this. So I'm excited to check it out. Plus I like visual novels, so there's that too. Next up, Capcom has announced that a PlayStation 5 optimized versions of Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and Resident Evil 7 are all on the way and will be available later this year. Existing owners basically get the upgrade to the PS5 version for free. Thank God for that. But they didn't really go into details about what to expect as far as what's going to be different. But Matt, what do you think about the announcement that these games are all getting PS5 versions?
I think it's cool. I think the fact that it's free is just such an easy sell. Like I'm hoping that the base price for these games don't really change at all, because I'm sure you can catch a lot of these deeply on sale. Resident Evil 2 is the only one that kind of stands out for me, just because I was curious about that game when it came out. I still need to finish Resident Evil Village, so that's kind of, bumps that up the list a little bit for me in terms of, the order in which I'm going to be playing stuff. I think this is cool. Like, while 3 and 7 doesn't really do much for me, I'm not really, interested in going back to 7. And maybe if I really like 2, then I'll journey into 3. But this does raise the chances of me going to these games at all, just because again I can play a better optimized version for the PS5. And the fact that it's free again is just awesome. I love this kind of stuff. I hope that this kind of becomes again more of the standard hint nudge nudge towards these free upgrade paths. It's just a nice simple way to enjoy the experience no matter where you're playing. So I think this is dope.
I think this is awesome news as well. As someone who's, to be fair, I play Resident Evil. I've basically replayed Resident Evil 2 like every 3 months. I've beaten that game 8 times now, Matt, as far as like the remake, not even the original version, which I've also beaten like 10 times as well, because I love Resident Evil 2. It's one of my all-time favorite horror games. God forbid they give me another excuse, to go back to the game again. I'm like, oh, shucks, I guess I got to play Resident Evil 2 again. But to your point, Matt, about the price raising, I think this is the type of thing where we've seen when these types of games get upgrades, it's a long time before they go on sale again. And usually the price doesn't go back to full price, but it also is higher than probably what the price is now. So I will say that if you don't already own these games already, they still come up on sale a lot. So I recommend grabbing them now while they're cheap and before the price, stays not on sale, at least for, another 6 months, probably after these optimized versions come out. So that's kind of my advice, especially because they have a bundle pack with Resident Evil 2 and 3 that goes on sale all the time. And it's usually pretty cheap, like maybe $25 Canadian for both games. So you can't really argue with that. Plus, again, to your point, Matt, if you play Resident Evil 2 and like it, you're definitely going to want to play 3 at that point, because I think those are both really solid games. And then 7, I'm glad to see it getting updates as well. So yeah, I'm excited to see what these changes are. But my advice, grab these now. As soon as you see them go on sale, I would grab them if you were at all interested, because I think it'll be a while again before they go on sale after that. And then last news story this week, Bandai Namco have announced Pac-Man Museum Plus, which is a collection featuring 14 Pac-Man titles, as well as a customizable virtual arcade. It'll be coming to PlayStation 4 on May 27th. I actually really like Pac-Man, so I'm actually excited about this announcement because it looks like it's going to be a really good collection of Pac-Man titles. My only disappointment is that my all-time favorite Pac-Man title, Miss Pac-Man, not in this collection, but there's a lot of good games in here besides Ms. Pac-Man. So I definitely think it's worth checking out. But Matt, are you all excited? I don't even know if you like Pac-Man.
Where's Battle Network? Anytime that there's any collection announced, I will come back to this. This is fine for fans of Pac-Man. I know it's not Capcom. I know, Ryan. But for me, this doesn't really do much for me. I'm not really a big Pac-Man fan. Just call me my Battle Network.
I thought you'd be more offended that when I talked about the Resident Evil story all about Capcom, you didn't mention Battle Network there, but you mentioned it when we're talking about Bandai Namco. Like, what's going on here, Matt?
Yes. Yes. Stick to the narrative. Never forget.
But I'm glad to see Bandai Namco doing more collections like this, because I think that gives me hope because there's a lot of older Bandai Namco titles that I would love to see get re-released, because we're seeing them do this and Klonoa. And I think they have like a really extensive back catalog that I would love to see kind of like re-releases for, especially the Tales series in particular. Like a lot of those games are either Japan only or they're stranded on consoles that people don't want to pull out right now. So I would love to see more of that maybe. But
can I add a story to the docket real quick? because I just remembered about this and I forgot to put this in, but we finally got word yesterday that The Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero is coming to the West in September. We got a release date of September. What was it? September 27th in North America. I'm really hyped about this. I love the Trails series. Trails of Cold Steel 4 is I loved 1, 2, and 3. I love Legend of the Sky. And to finally be able to play Zero, which was famously adds a very fundamental part of the story from a neighboring area, but that was never localized. There's a bunch of fan translations out there for it if you want to play it that way, but it is finally coming, and I'm very, very excited about it. I just wanted to drop that release date in here very quick before we move on from news, because I'm hyped about this.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. I completely forgot that news came out this week, so I'm very glad that you added it to the doc, because I know both of us will probably be playing it, and I'm very excited to check that out as well. Also, if you want to hear us talk about, Neon Falcom, the company that makes the Trails of Cold Steel games, or the Ease games, or any of these other things, listen to the RPG Cave this weekend. Garrett and I did an hour-long discussion about Neon Falcom. We talked about their history as well as some of their titles, and maybe we do a Trails of series, maybe with a certain other person on this podcast, maybe later in the year, maybe to kind of celebrate the release of this game. So there you go. So that's really exciting. But of course, let's let some of our friends into the car with us. It is time for the carpool, with our one question this week coming to us from Todd Oxtra at Talkstra, who asked the question: why do you think Sony front-loaded their year again? Sifu, MLB The Show, Horizon, and Gran Turismo 7 are all coming out within 2 months. There are no major April, May, or June releases currently. So do they have any more room to breathe this year? Matt, what do you think about Todd's question? Because he does bring up a good point. After MLB The Show comes out, what else is coming from Sony first party this year besides maybe God of War?
Well, I mean, Forspoken is going to be an exclusive coming. While it's not Sony first party, it is going to be an exclusive to PlayStation. So, and that's coming out in May. So I would also, count that as something that's, an exclusive coming to PlayStation this year. I don't think that that's all that they're doing. I think they have more surprises in store. I just think that right now, I really do feel like there is a massive state of play incoming sometime in the next little while to talk to us about whatever Spartacus is, on top of just updating us with what's coming for the rest of the year. I don't see any sense for them, unless there is a slew of delays coming later this year that we just don't know about yet, that they would front load all of this again because last year it was very obviously because of the pandemic and everything going on. I don't see that happening again this year. I think they have a lot that they're not telling us, whether that's first party games or deals that they have for exclusivity with third party studios. Whether it is Final Fantasy 16, if that is actually imminent this year, if that is God of War, if there are some of these juicy rumors about other first-party Sony titles coming back that are supposedly launching this year, I think there's a lot more that we don't know about. And I really do think that this is going to be a massive year for PS5 if the front of this year is any indication, because I do think there's a lot more coming that we just don't know about yet, Ryan. But am I off base here?
So I think actually, looking at this list of games, I think the beginning of the year only feels front loaded because stuff like Horizon and Sifu were supposed to come out last year, and then they got delayed to this year. Whereas at this point, the beginning of the year would have just been, Gran Turismo and MLB The Show, essentially, and then Forspoken, to your point. And that would have been kind of the beginning of the year. So it would have been a little more balanced rather than cramming everything into a 2-month period. I just don't think they expected it to go that way. But they kind of had to release Horizon, and get it out the door when it was ready, kind of thing. Even though their release timing, of course, was kind of poor once again, releasing a week before Elden Ring. But, that's neither here nor there. But as far as the question is concerned, I agree with you. There is probably some stuff that we don't know about. But I'm going to be a little more pessimistic than you on this, Matt, because I do think that while there is stuff that they're not telling us, I don't think it's going to be a huge fall for PlayStation again this year. Assuming God of War comes out this year, which I'm still in the camp that thinks God of War is coming out this year. I think that'll be maybe because my original prediction was April. Obviously, that's wrong at this point. But I think it's probably closer to what you talked about before when we did our predictions, Matt. It's probably an August or September game at this point for God of War. And I think maybe their big thing this fall isn't a particular game, it's PlayStation VR 2. I think that's the launch of PlayStation VR 2 and then the games that go along with it, rather than having a big first party release this fall. And then beyond that, I think they might have one more game over the summer, and then that might just be it for first party this year. I'm thinking that that's more realistic and more what I'm expecting to see from them this year. I'd love to see more. I'd love to see maybe, you know, them having like 4 or 5 first party games that we don't know about that are coming out this year, but I just don't see that happening. And plus it's not really their usual MMO anyways. Like any announcements that we get coming up at maybe a state of play, I think will be more geared towards next year. Or maybe they'll announce a release date this year, but then it gets pushed to next year, let's say. So yeah, we'll see. But I personally don't see like a giant glut of games this fall, but I don't think Sony needs it either. People are still buying the hardware anyways. And then I think it gives the breathing move that PSVR 2 probably needs this fall to really get people kind of into that, rather than having to buy a whole bunch of launch a bunch of first party games around that. I think like just having it have its own window for, you know, 3 months over the holidays, I think would be the perfect release window for that.
So are you saying you now do think PSVR 2 is coming out this year,
I'm
Ryan?
more in the camp now than I was, you know, a month ago when we first talked about it. But I'm still not 100% convinced yet. I mean, at this point, it's like, who knows? Especially because it is hardware. Plus, we learned recently that there are parts in the PSVR headset that also are used in the PlayStation 5, and they're not in massive supply. So how many resources are they willing to, you know, take away from PlayStation 5 production to put into PSVR production, assuming that it comes out this year, rather than maybe waiting till next year where, you know, maybe the parts shortage isn't as bad, but we'll see. Anyways, we got to get going. But before we go, Matt, plugs go.
Yeah, you can find me over on Twitter at burnout_Matt. You can also find me over at youtube.com/burnoutbrighter. And for any fans of The Boys, we're actually doing a sponsored stream tomorrow night. So the day that this is going up on March 4th, we're going to start at 8 p.m. EST. We're doing a sponsored stream with Phanology for the new The Boys Presents Diabolical, which is like a short anthology animated series that is kind of going alongside, before The Boys Season 3 comes. So we're going to be starting at 8 p.m. EST and going for just over 2 hours. We're going to be watching the whole thing front to back over at twitch.tv/burnoutbrighter7. So come hang out with us. We're very excited, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, as for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Yumi Capriz, on YouTube at youtube.com/Yumi Capri, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Matt Sawinski, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been episode 41 of the PlayStation Drive, and we're out. The PlayStation Drive is fueled by patrons over at patreon.com/Yumi Capri. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you to our over 70 patrons, starting with our Capremium producers, Dallas Ford, Jonathan Brown, the man behind the music on the Xbox Drive and the Nintendo Drive. You can check out his new album, In My Element, over on Apple Music, as well as his website, and Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team. Our platinum producers are Robbie Bobby Miller and Trucker Sloth, and our gold members, Argo, Brandon Myers, Dallas Robbins, Dano, Emily O'Kelly, Foolish Fuji, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Marcus O'Neill, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, RJ Kern, Skinny Matt, Tony Baker, and Xavier Reyes. Thank you all for all of your support, and if you're interested in joining the Patreon, head over to patreon.com/Yumi Capri and pick the tier that's right for you.